Stage 20 of this quite incredible Giro d'Italia always had the potential to astound us, but I don't think anybody was prepared for quite what was about to unfold. Riders signed in a day after one of the hardest days of the Giro so far. It had been 5,000 metres, stifling heat, and not too many changes in the GC. A slight increase in lead for Del Toro, Carapaz gaining time on Simon Yates. But there was only 1 minute and 21 between first and third, and this is what the riders had to ride. The major difficulty saved for the end. The gigantic, brutal Colle delle Finestre. Almost 20 kilometres, and the last 8 Ks on gravel roads. A finish in Sestriere for the first time since 2020. The distance too, 205 kilometres. And when the flag was waved, we wondered if it would be the same game. Satellite riders up the road perhaps, those wanting a stage win too. The game wasn't quite as intense as the days previous. It did still take a good 40 kilometres to settle down properly. And once more, Mess Pedersen was involved. He had 2 teammates with him, Carlos Verona and Jacopo Mosca. 2 groups that got away finally came together. It was just more than 30 riders in the breakaway. They were soon given a decent chunk of time too. UAE Emirates allowing the gap to grow to over 8 minutes. And then EF Education Easy Post started to ride. Their sports directors had told our television coverage that 8 or 9 minutes would be the ideal gap. They wanted to put pressure on behind and make the race hard. At the front, Moscat was trying to keep the gap going, hoping to set up Verona for a second stage win. Onto the other major difficulty, the Colle dell'Is, and EF were pushing the pace. Not everybody was in agreement in the breakaway, but again, tempers were flaring. It was a het-up day at the Giro. The last major stage before the processional one in Rome. In the far north-west of Italy, there was drama too. EF leading people down the descent and almost leading themselves and their leader astray. Out the front, Wout van Aert was warming up the engine. The only real satellite rider for the leaders' teams who was there. And then the race into the Colle delle Finestre. Usually 60 minutes of hell. The climb where Chris Froome did what he did in 2018. And Simon Yates lost the pink jersey. The break were trying to break things up. Chris Harper was soon away. For a while he had Remy Rocha with him. Then Alessandro Verre came across as the Australian was on a mission. In the peloton, they reached it, and it was happening. EF Education Easy Post setting up Richard Carapaz and Isaac Del Toro's domestiques being burned off. Yates was nowhere to be seen at this point, but he, Derek G and others would try to move their way forward. That as Carapaz set off, and Isaac Del Toro, 1 day from Rome, 24 hours from eternal glory as a Giro winner at the age of 21, was right on the wheel. But there was a long way to go, and Simon Yates, after a couple of kilometres, made his move. A brave move, given his history on this climb. A ride looking for redemption. He was quickly across, and it was the podium on show. He'd attacked not once, but several times. And it was about the 4th time of asking that the Visma Lease bike rider went away from Carapaz and from Del Toro. Derek G was at the front. He was trying to gate crash the podium, and Yates was opening up a decent gap. 10 seconds became 20. G dropped again. Carapaz attacking and continuing to ride strongly. Yates was still alone, and he was heading onto the gravel sector. Every time Carapaz went, though, Del Toro seemed to be equal to it, without riding himself. When Simon Yates opened up the gap to a minute, Carapaz continued to try and press on. By this point, Yates was above Carapaz in the GC up to second. Onto the gravel, and it would be Chris Harper leaving Verre behind. Harper, who'd never won a Grand Tour stage and who came here looking for the GC, would also get the Red Bull kilometre. Simon Yates, by this point, was extending his lead, and he was just about becoming the virtual Maglia Rosa on the road. But there was still no real reaction from the Maglia Rosa himself. 1:59, and still no reaction. Yates looking good, but there was a long way to go, and the valley road before Sestria. Over the top, taking Chimacopi, was Harper. Yates wasn't far behind, and his gap was becoming a serious one. The ghosts of the past had been buried. Demons defeated. But could Del Toro be beaten? Further down the valley, Wout van Aert played the perfect teammate, just as we'd seen before at the Tour de France. But then this happened. The Maglia Rosa, Richard Carapaz staring at each other, and the gap began to balloon. Van Aert continued to pull on. The stage win, well, that was going to Harper, no doubt about that, and it looked clear even with 10 kilometres to go. But the real story in the GC was unfolding behind. Apathy, a stare-off, a standoff. The young Mexican and the old former Giro winner Carapaz unable to come to agreement as to who should ride. Yates did ride away, Van Aert done, and Del Toro knew he was losing the Giro d'Italia. Suddenly there was a 5-minute gap on the road between Simon Yates, in a twist of fate, back at the front of the Giro on a Colle delle Finestre day. A wonderful story written by Chris Harper, Yates' former teammate. He won a second stage for Jayco and a biggest win of his career. Joy for him and for Yates up the mountain that defined his relationship with the Giro d'Italia. He himself redefining that relationship, turning horror memories to joy and the low to the high of a crowning career moment. Barring incident or accident, Simon Yates will win the Giro d'Italia in Rome, and he will do it by some margin. Behind, they were defeated. The emotion was everywhere. Simon Yates, and all of us looking on, could not believe what he'd just done. Even the best Hollywood scriptwriters couldn't put it up for him like that. And even the Maglia Rosa, for 11 days until this point, had a hat tip to the man who'd just taken it off him. He received congratulations from Pellizzari, his friend. Del Toro will take the white jersey from this, but pink goes to Yates. The stage goes to Harper. Sestria saw one of the most dramatic days in professional cycling's history. Chris Harper winning a stage that will go down in the memory. He enjoyed his moment to be associated with this race, and now a Grand Tour stage winner. It was an epic ride from the Aussie. But the headlines, and winning by minutes in the end, after having trailed by almost a minute and a half. What a turnaround for Simon Yates. Already a Vuelta winner, now a Giro d'Italia winner as soon as he arrives in Rome. They used to call it doing a Froome. That's now changed. That was certainly doing a Yates. And Yates will pull on the pink tunic for the final stage in Rome. It'll be contested by the sprinters, but for the general classification, it will be a procession. Just over 140 kilometers in the Eternal City. And Yates' relationship with the Giro eternally redefined by that ride, that day, heroic planning and teamwork, and those legs that pulled it off in those mountains.